Welcome. My name is Grandma Storm. I write stories for young adults. Today I am reading chapters 51 through 55 in my book, The Book of Faith. Thoughts of a Dancer. The old woman sighed. They want acrobats. They want music. They want drama. They want life and death. It is all left to us. We are tired, sick and tired, old, too old. She coughed. Her left knee felt iffy. Best not say anything that revealed thoughts. Better to lie. Better to lie to your own brain. That almost felt like a joke. She did not laugh. She felt sick. Someone came running to say the procession was almost there. The arena orchestra began the royal anthem. The dancer was among the hundreds of performers on a dirt field in the middle of a crumbling stadium. She looked around. All the rouge, blue wigs, and neon costumes could not make up for creaky knees and bad backs. We are too old for this. Her sister was part of the card display in the stand opposite the Dear Queen's review stand. Her sister confided she was expected to change 9 flip books. To the dignitaries in the stands, the books created a kaleidoscope of pictures illustrating the achievements of the Dear Queen. That was too many cards, complained her sister. It would look sloppy. What a joke. Her eye twitched. A flute trilled. It was her cue. The lights came up. The music swelled. She bounced into her routine as the brown leathers bearing the throne of the Dear Queen's mirror swung into the arena. The dancer's orange chiffon skirt swirled while she hopped on her left foot, brandishing a green parasol in her right hand. She and hundreds of dancers were personifying the happy industry of the Dear Queen's grateful subjects. On cue, she leapt, but bobbled the landing. She swung into the next part. All the dancers ran to the center, forming a mosaic of flowers on the arena floor. Most everyone got to the correct position. Could have been better. Now it was time for the big finish. Rushing forward to stand below the throne of the Dear Queen's mirror, she gazed at the beautiful face. Golden ribbons adorned the head. A crown of brilliant diamonds framed the fair brow. The Dear Queen's mirror was stunning in her blue gown. The dancer wondered, as she hopped and twirled, if she would see the same mirror at the next eve of the time of congregation. One never knew. She was surprised to see the Dear Queen's mirror with a child on her lap. A little girl dressed in gray. Looked alive. Well, over the years she had seen many strange things. There were the rumors about the Dear Queen's collections. Someone once said the Dear Queen had a lot of baby dolls. Whatever for? What were they really? Better to know nothing. Time for the big finish, a 1 and a 2 and smile. Tirzah looked down to see an old crone in orange skirts with no teeth, grinning like a buffoon. 52. Ashiel ran. It was vital to complete the research. If he hurried, he was sure he would make it in time to the feast of the eve of the time of congregation. Besides being compulsory, he knew he would see Tirzah there. Above all, he wanted to see Tirzah. It felt good to run. All the collections piled in the streets created an elaborate obstacle course. If the pile wasn't too high and he was reasonably sure of the footing on the other side, he hurtled over the stacks. Those who saw him thought little of it. That boy always had the correct documentation. If one of the keepers of the Dear Queen's Royal Street Department stopped him, he knew he would see Dr. Luce's authorization on the young man's papers. No one questioned that signature. The second scholar was commissioned to write a new book on the royal lineage of the dear Queen. It was to be his magnum opus. Many books were written on this topic, but the dear Queen demanded a new work. Dr. Luce assigned the second scholar the responsibility. He was so honored, he was incapacitated. His nerves overwhelmed his delicate brain, yet the deadline for publication loomed ever closer. He petitioned Dr. Luce for more time. Instead, Dr. Luce ordered Ashiel to assist. Besides, younger legs were needed to make the hike to the temple. Not all books were catalogued at the university. A special collection on genealogies was housed at the temple. The second scholar needed that research. Publication ensured position, position ensured money, money ensured food. The second scholar liked to eat. It was that simple. As with books of this type, once published, people in the know would be seen conspicuously walking about with a copy under their arm. Perhaps one or two would read the introduction or scan a page for talking points before tiring of carrying it. Then they would simply toss the book on top of a heap. The real consumers of literature about the dear Queen were little dry bookworms. They were quite well read. The temple was not a house of worship in the usual sense. Any awe toward a creator was argued away long ago. Questions of origins or of a designer were considered ignorant, stupid, boorish. Only the low-minded believed in a higher being. The elite believed in science. Anyone with the slightest intention of rising in society dabbled and babbled in the sciences. A few words quoted from experts, a couple of equations strewn about, a lab report or two would dazzle the humble and silence the questioning. Science proved to all, and even to him, that he did not exist. With that snub, he went home for a cup of tea, a good book, and then maybe a nap. He left the dear Queen and her ilk to their own unhappy devices. Or had he? The temple was a museum now. The marble columns and golden roof housed the trinity of science, industry, and progress. The dear Queen was adored as the royal progenitor of advancement. Her buildings, her roadways, her inventions, her programs, her interests in education and social welfare were catalogued, documented, and lionized. All displays in the exhibits featured paintings and statues of the dear Queen, which remarkably resembled the fair-haired Tirzah. But no one ever came to the temple to see the exhibits. The only beings to shuffle through the marble halls were a few curators and a few rats. They bore a striking resemblance to one another. At the height of the Temple Mount, Ashiel stopped to catch his breath and survey Tophet. At that elevation, it looked better. It certainly smelled better. He rather enjoyed these outings until confronted with the tomes of genealogies. So-and-so begot so-and-so, who begot so-and-so, who begot so-and-so, who begot the dear queen. That all this begetting would culminate in the person of the dear queen was, to say the least, a disappointment. There was always a curious, oily ash coating everything in the library. Disturbing stacks of books to find the required volumes was a dirty business. At his earlier visits, the curators supervised Ashiel's research. It did not take long before they found the project boring. The chief curator supplied the boy with a signature stamp for the mandatory approvals. Inspection, authentication, and oversight were not as interesting as finding a corner for a nap. Ashiel located the needed books on his own, pulled up a chair to a long table, opened a bottle of ink, unrolled a scroll, and began writing. An hour into his project, the sound of heavy footsteps, the squeaking of wheels, and the sound of voices distracted Ashiel from his research. Not moving, he shifted his eyes from the books to the doorway. A wheelchair pushed by two brown leathers passed. Dr. Luce was next. Two more brown leathers pulled a cart covered by a black cloth. A guard detail carrying the pikes followed at the rear. What was this all about? Ashiel gathered his notes for the second scholar and tucked them into his tunic. With his heart hammering in his chest, he slid along the wall in secret pursuit. Through the labyrinth he followed until he saw them turn into a courtyard. As the brown leathers wrestled the wheelchair and cart over stairs, Ashiel slid behind a column to hide. A wave of sickness washed over him. What was he doing? He was risking all for what? To satisfy his curiosity? How stupid was he? Yet he could not move. He could not look away. Brown leathers scurried out as Dr. Luce donned a red robe. Then Ashiel was alone with Dr. Luce and the dear queen in the center of the temple. The courtyard was lined with squat black columns. Every surface was carved with squared blocks of men's heads in sooty stone. Shadows played over rock features of bulging eyes and gaping mouths with thick, lolling tongues. In the center was the black stump of a wide tree bound in bands of iron. Dr. Luce lit fires in tall twin basins by the stump. The figure in the wheelchair mumbled and nodded a scabby head. Her crown of diamonds glittered as flames shot heavenward. The dear queen swayed in her chair, moaning and writhing. Uncoiling, she rose tall, swinging her head from fire to fire. She raised long, thin arms to the flames and fell back, slumping into her wheelchair. Grabbing an iron pike, Dr. Luce beat the black stump like a drum. Rousing the dear queen, struck at the red-robed doctor with dripping fangs. He slashed at her with the pike, striking her in the belly with the butt of the stick. The dear queen screamed, beat the air with her arms, and fell back into the wheelchair. Pulling out a flask, Dr. Luce poured something down her throat. The dear queen choked, spat, and lashed at him again. The pattern repeated. Each time the dear queen rose up stronger. Croaking like a frog, the dear queen began to chant, I am, I am, I am, I am, I am, only me. I am alone. I require what is mine. I take what is mine. I will have it. I will keep it. Only I, me. As she uncoiled from the wheelchair, her gown fell away, revealing the naked body of a serpent with a woman's bony arms. Slimy scales shimmered in the firelight, flashing iridescent hues. Swaying, she spat into the basins. Flames leaped to the sky. With deadly intent, the dear queen jerked away from the blaze and struck at Dr. Luce. As he jumped clear, he threw back the black shroud covering the cart. He leapt to the shelter of a black column, beating the flames, licking his robes. Piled in the cart, Ashiel saw dolls bundled like babies in blankets. Firelight revealed painted faces and jeweled bands binding little bodies. The dear queen bent low, snatched one in each of her woman's arms and held them to the sky, swaying and chanting, I am, I am, I am. I am, I am, I am. Only me. I am alone. I require what is mine. I take what is mine. I will have it. I will keep it. Only I. Me. Then to the basins of flame. The bodies burst into the fire. She screamed, jumping from the shelter of the black column. Dr. Luce danced beneath her. The dear queen groped for more bodies and thrust them into the fire. The basins exploded in blood-red flames. Ashiel turned to run from the horror. In the dark, he stumbled along narrow corridors. There was a turn and then a dead end. Ashiel crumpled into a shaking, sobbing heap and was sick to his stomach. He slammed his fists into the floor. Pain was a relief. His mind cleared. He flung back his head and breathed. His eyes opened to total darkness. He could see nothing. There was the thump. The thump was like something fallen from a tall shelf. In the dark, his hand felt for the thump and closed around it. It was small and thick. If he lived to see the light of another day, he might look at whatever it was later. Screams of rage reverberated through the temple. Sounds of running, booted feet echoed down the hall. Then silence. Hours passed. In the gray mist of dawn, he could finally see to escape the maze within the temple. Ashiel stumbled away. He had missed the eve of the time of congregation ceremony. What evil would come of that, he could only imagine. Before full light, he was in his room at the university. It was then that he thought of the thump. He pulled it from his tunic, leather binding, delicate parchment, a book. Opening it, his eyes fell upon these words, Is not this a branch plucked out of the burning? That is me, thought Ashiel, a branch plucked out of the burning. Ashiel slipped the book in his tunic. When he finished with the scholars, he would find Tirzah. 53. In full flourish of another bow before Tirzah in the great hall, Skiva was lifted off the ground and carried away by two brown leathers. His feet rarely touched the earth as he was hauled out of the great hall, down a path and into an airless reception room in the arena. He was dumped without ceremony before the wheelchair of the dear queen. Dr. Luce stood at her side. Courtiers, ladies, and brown leathers crowded shoulder to shoulder. Cramped though he was, Skiva swung into the most elegant bow, ending with his lips stretched thin, exposing big white teeth. His eyes squinted to slits. The dear queen was not easy on the eyes, nor pleasant to the nose. Ah, yes, I believe you are called Skiva, hissed the dear queen. I remember you and your teeth. So you brought me a little girl. How charming. Yes, my dear queen. I, along with the entire universe, bow before you. I, Skiva, your most humble slave, have brought you a child, thinking of you and only you through my entire journey. You are my inspiration on the longest road, in the deepest cave, on the darkest night. When I, Skiva, faced hunger and deprivation, the thought of you inspired my greatest effort. You alone are to be feared. To you alone are due all honor and majesty. To you alone I owe all I have and all I am. To you alone is all evidence of progress and proper thinking. To you alone. You look like a spider, all black and spindly, screeched the dear queen. I don't like spiders. Maybe I will order a brown leather to stomp your spider guts all over the floor. Skiva threw himself before her, splayed his limbs, and cried, To please you is my only desire. The dear queen rocked back in her wheelchair and cackled. She laughed so hard she gagged. When she stopped to breathe, she leaned over the prostrate Skiva and said, Get up, my black spider. I will splatter your guts later. My dear queen, began Skiva, raising himself to one knee. Your spider, Skiva, is true to you, and to you alone. I brought you the living child. I did this in devotion to you. I thought only of you day and night while enduring the struggle of fulfilling your desire. Skiva went on. No one stopped him. All the phrases of devotion and adulation he could invent spilled forth. He remained upon one knee, blathering. No one was listening. It was all lies. Everyone knew it. May I be so bold as to request my reward? The dear queen, whose attention had strayed to watching some woozy courtiers, swung her head to the man kneeling before her. Her filmy eyes narrowed, struggling to focus on this spidery thing called Skiva. What? What do you want? My reward? You black spider, you, hissed the dear queen. Reward, you say? I will grant it and more. Sit at my feet, be my spider. Also, I will give you gold and silver, diamonds and rubies, and 4 broken teacups, and 2 jars of sour pickles, and one of my favorite left shoes. One never knows when one might need a spare left shoe. Turning to Dr. Luce, the dear queen ordered, Give my spider a bag of gold. Arrange for the other rewards as I commanded. Inform the royal accountants of the payment. The dear queen was thinking of a cracked bowl and an old barrel Skiva might like, when several courtiers swooned and fell on their faces. Apparently they had helped themselves to too much blue liquor and were a bit drunk. Likely it was that and the closeness of the sovereign's breath. Such boobies, very funny. She howled, she shrieked, and then her face hardened. Haul them to the camps, ordered the dear queen, pointing at the offenders struggling to regain their feet. How dare they make themselves foolish in my presence on the eve of the time of congregation? Brown leathers hurried to do the dear queen's bidding. Skiva resolved to be a good spider. After the Deer Queen ordered ceremonies to begin, he rose to his feet to walk beside the wheelchair as she was carried to a high balcony. Brown Leathers bumped him away. When he tried to follow courtiers, he was jostled to the ladies in waiting. The ladies in waiting pinched and poked him until he walked behind them. However, as soon as the Deer Queen was settled in the royal box, he picked his way through them all to squat beside her wheelchair. From obscurity to being the Deer Queen's pet spider, he was on his way. Who knew how high he would rise? Who could stop him? Dr. Loose was not invulnerable. Every man had his flaw. He would be a good little spider. He would watch and wait and spin his web. His mother would be pleased. The presentations proceeded. The dramas displayed. The celebrations continued. Hours passed. The audience of courtiers and others so privileged to sit by the Deer Queen struggled to stay awake. The Deer Queen was not so troubled. She was slumped in her wheelchair, her head hanging to the side, snoring away the spectacles. Her black spider squatted beside her, blinking his black eyes and grinding his white teeth. On the lower throne, where the mirror sat, Tirzah felt her head nodding, her eyes closing. The child slept curled in Tirzah's arms. That was when Brown Leathers came for the girl. Before Tirzah knew what was happening, they snatched the little one out of her arms. Her instinct was to clutch the child to her bosom, but it happened so fast, and the little one was gone. Tired beyond words, hungry and despairing, Tirzah gave way to tears. She buried her face in her hands and wept. At that moment, fireworks signaled the finale, fracturing the night with blast and blaze. All eyes turned to the spectacle in the black sky, and did not notice Tirzah. And where was Ashiel? 54. Dr. Luce's head did not touch his pillow that night. There was too much to do. There was the advancement in the horology lab. There was the arrival of a child. There was the security breach in the halls of the Royal University. He needed to go to his private collections. Preparations for the time of congregation kept him away. He wanted some of the instrumentation for the horology lab. The encouraging report submitted by the first scholar was overdue. He would look into the security issue at the same time. Probably nothing. Then why did the hair on his neck stand on end? His lip curled, and he scurried away. Her eyes opened, but it was so dark she could not see. Faith stretched out her hand and touched something soft. It felt like a pillow. Where am I? Where is the Deer Queen? Faith felt a ledge and swung her legs over the side. Reaching with her feet, she found the floor. As she took a tentative step, she tripped. Her hands flew out and she landed on something. Someone? Hair got in her mouth. She gagged. Trying to get her hair off her tongue, she spat. A metallic clip, a mechanical clack entered her ear. A door swung open, groaning on heavy hinges. She saw the silhouette of a man. He threw a switch and light filled the space. Faith saw a cavernous room filled with dolls, sized of children. but not at all like children. Fantastical faces of silver and gems or gold and copper stared at her. Bodies wrapped in colored silks, precious furs, or tanned leathers surrounded her. Stacks and stacks of wooden boxes leaned against the walls. Faith looked to see what she tripped over in the dark. A body wrapped in bright orange silks, with a face of slate and eyes of green gems, lay at her feet. The hair was red and spiked. "Is this yours?" Faith's attention jerked from monstrosity to man. He was dressed in a black robe and held a silver chain with a key. Faith clutched at her throat. Until that moment, she had not noticed it was missing. "Yes, it is." "It is an interesting trinket." "Who gave it to you?" "Nicholas gave it to me." At the name of Nicholas, the man's eyes widened and his white skin flushed. He slipped the key and chain into a pocket of his black robe. "That is my key." "So it may be, but it is in my pocket, is it not?" "What is your name?" "Faith." The man's eyes narrowed. "Interesting," was the slow reply. "The dear Queen sent me to fetch you. She wants you by her side." "Who are you?" "I am called Dr. Luce." Faith climbed out of the box, avoided the horrid doll on the floor, and followed the man out of the room. 55. Good morning, sir." Ashiel slowed his pace to match the old man's shuffle. After what he had witnessed at the temple, Ashiel was not sure what to do until he talked with Tirzah. Until then, he would do the bidding of the scholars. "I have the records you required. Shall I give them to you now?" "Oh, there you are. Good morning, my boy. In the name of the dear Queen, good morning. Oh, yes, yes. You have been my legs. I am grateful. Well done, Ashiel," commented the old man as he skimmed the scrolls. "Everything is here. Documentation, references, everything. Thank you. Well done. Well done." The second scholar continued, "My dear boy, you were absent from the feast of the eve of the eve of the time of congregation. Nor did I see you at the dear Queen's royal arena later. That is quite serious. Is everything all right?" "I was delayed at the temple." Right. Believe me, I understand." The second scholar nodded vigorously, almost losing his wig. "Do not worry. You have done me a great service. I'll cover for you, my boy. I'll cover for you. Those accountants with their timesheets will be the death of us all. If they ask, tell me. The dear Queen's genealogy project is of the utmost importance. They could not possibly have a problem with that. If they persist, I will just drop Dr. Luce's name into the conversation. That will take care of everything." "Thank you, sir." The third scholar joined them as they turned down the hall to the dear Queen's Royal Horology Laboratory. "I saw Dr. Luce in the halls this morning," noted the third scholar. "I was hoping to get a word with him, but he was in a hurry. Said he would meet with us in the horology lab second hour. You know how it is with him. Ever faithfully about the dear Queen's business." "Yes," agreed the second scholar quickly. "Yes, Dr. Luce is ever faithful to the dear Queen. We are all ever faithful to the dear Queen. She is the embodiment of all that is good." The old man looked to Ashiel, expecting him to repeat the mantra of goodness of the dear Queen. The boy was silent. "Ever faithful to the dear Queen, Ashiel?" Silence. The third scholar pursed his lips. The second scholar raised an eyebrow. The second scholar and the third scholar exchanged glances. Perhaps it was well the genealogical research was complete. Perhaps it was propitious the all-important ratio was written in chalk on the blackboard. This boy might not be here long. The camps were full of people, neglected to say the right thing at the right time. Thank you for listening. To hear more of the story, please come back soon, or you may purchase your own copy on Amazon. Just follow the links below.